Most people are familiar with 401ks, IRAs, or something similar. They know that it can help them save for the future, and many companies have a nice match in their 401k for at least part of the contributions. But one of the most powerful features of these accounts is the ability to delay or defer taxes on your savings. You see, most people need less money when they're older and retired. The mortgage is often paid off, no more childcare expenses, and no need to save for retirement. No need to live in an expensive city where the jobs are. No more commute and so on. Now, some expenses like medical and travel may actually be higher, but still most people need less money later in life and therefore may be able to pay less taxes. But in your younger years, if you have a decent job, you may be making more than you need and therefore can afford to save. Therefore, it makes sense to shift some of that money from higher earning years when you make more than you need to older years when you are retired and can really use that money. And how amazing would it be if you could also save money on taxes while doing it? Before we go any further, please make sure that you watch my video on tax brackets. Check out the link in the description below because it is really essential here. Assuming you watched it, let's consider the following example. Bob makes $100,000 a year. Bob will pay no taxes on the first $15,000 since he takes a standard deduction. Bob will pay only 10% on the next $12,000. He will pay only 12% on the next $36,000. And he will pay 22% on the remaining $37,000. Now, while Bob is happy not to pay taxes on some of his money and pay a very reasonable 10 and 12% on a big chunk of his salary, he's really not excited about paying 22% right now on these $37,000, especially since he lives below his means and he doesn't really need that money right now. How amazing would it be if he could somehow teleport this money into the future, pretend that he never received it this year, and make it look like he earned it when he's, say, 60 years old and wants to retire? How awesome would it be not to pay 22% right now and pay only a fraction of those taxes in the future? Now let's pretend that it's many years later. Bob is now about 60 years old. He receives these $37,000 from the past that used to be in the 22% tax bracket. But now it's a new year. So he's not going to pay 22%. He's not going to pay over $8,000 on this. It's a new year, therefore he gets another standard deduction. So he's going to take $15,000 and he's going to take it tax-free. Then he's going to take the next $12,000 and he's going to pay only 10%, which is about $1,200. The rest is his. And then the next remaining $10,000, now he's only going to pay 12%. Again, 12% on $10,000 is also happens to be $1,200. That's taxes, and the rest is his. So you see, instead of paying over $8,000 when he was young, he's going to pay $1,200, another $1,200, and zero, $2,400. That's over $5,500 of savings in his pocket. Now, imagine that he does that every year. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars over the duration of his retirement. And that's what deferring taxes can do for us. Now, there are several big assumptions here. I'll be the first to admit that it's not the most realistic example. It's just a simple example to illustrate a point. First of all, not everyone can afford to save $37,000 a year. Also, 401ks and IRAs, they have limits. Not everyone can shelter $37,000 from taxes every year, although some people can, and couples can do even more. But even if you do $10,000, it still works in a similar fashion. Another big assumption is that the rules will stay the same. If taxes go up in the future, this plan can seriously backfire. Who knows, in the future, we may miss the good old days when taxes were only 22%. And Trust me, historically, our taxes currently are pretty low. In one of the future videos, we'll go through the history of taxes and tax brackets, and you will see that 22% for this bracket is not unreasonable. Of course, taxes may get even lower, but nobody can predict the future. So we also assume that Bob will not have other income. But if he's a diligent saver and started early and invested well, he could become very wealthy, and he can have more money in his older years than he ever had when he was younger, which may mean much higher taxes. This example is only to demonstrate that there are ways to shelter some of the money that you don't need today and shift it to the future where you hope your taxes will be smaller. There are a lot of people for whom it really worked out. They did it by contributing to 401ks, traditional IRAs, and other tax-deferred accounts. But there are those who would rather not play that game. There are those who would rather not wonder what taxes will look like in the future. For those people, we have Roth IRAs, Roth 401ks, and so on. We will definitely discuss those in the future. But for now, 401ks, traditional IRAs, and other tax-deferred accounts are an interesting option. One other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of those accounts have strings attached. In other words, maybe you can't touch the money till you're 59 and a half. Also, the money that you earn from the investments in those accounts may be treated not as favorably as some other investments, but we will definitely talk more about that in detail. The bottom line is, only you can decide what's right for you. But it starts with knowing your options, knowing what tools are available and what they can do for you. Once you know that deferring some taxes is an option, and you understand the pros and cons and limitations, then you can decide if it's the best option for your particular situation. But before we can talk about the pros and cons, there are a few more topics that we need to cover, and I'm going to cover them in the next few videos. As always, I do my best to ensure that the information I present here is accurate. Having said that, I'm just a regular guy sharing what I know to the best of my ability. This is just for fun, definitely not a financial advice. If you find any inaccuracies, let me know. If you have any ideas for future topics, let me know. Be sure to subscribe and select all notifications so you don't miss my next video.